Thank you very much, and I hope you won't mind if I more or less read this to you. Roughly at the same time as EMLO, the Bavarian Academy of Sciences in Munich has started a long-term project, which would be this one. No, like this. Scheduled to run for 15 years, which I've been kindly invited to present here by Isabelle Charmentier. It features physicians' correspondences of the German-speaking territories from 1500 to 1700 and is situated at Würzburg. During approximately 6 years of work now, and after one evaluation and facing the second one this summer, our team of 2 full-time researchers, assisted by a varying number of students, mostly from the classics department, has been able to enter some 26,000 letters to a database which has been available online for about a year now. And this is the address, which is not very handy at the moment, but we're trying to change this, and we have been trying for quite a long time, and this is one of the many computing items we have heard about from others here. These letters are catalogued in detail to a large extent by studying the originals and then indexed and or summarized in various depth. At the moment they come from over 280 various archives and libraries, mainly archives, and have been posted in what would be today 32 countries, ranging from Britain to Japan. In addition to these, we are also taking into account several hundreds of printed collections of letters from the 16th century onwards to the present day. Among the 12,000 individual persons identified up to now, about 2,600 are medical doctors of the early modern age. This is quite a lot of stuff. But compared to early modern letters online, of course, with its wide range of correspondence and correspondences, our database might at first seem to be somewhat specialistic. But though we do focus on a restricted number of persons due to their profession, it is not specialistic at all, in that we are not undertaking a collection of what was called epistolae medicinalis, medical letters in the narrow sense. As that would be only one part of the material, though the only one which has been relatively widely studied up to now, thanks to the printed collections. Instead, our project aims at bringing together the entire amount, not of medical letters, but of letters written to or by medical doctors of the 16th and 17th centuries, who come from or lived and worked in the German-speaking parts of early modern Europe. This includes, among many others, Italian refugees practicing in Switzerland, or German town physicians in many regions of Middle Eastern Europe, which are now part of Poland, the Czech Republic, or Russia. It includes personal physicians, foreign personal physicians also, to German princes or to the emperor, as well as German students of medicine undergoing academic training in France, Italy, or the Netherlands, or indeed Britain. Finally, it also includes letters these men exchanged with others who were not of their profession. Firstly, colleagues from other academic professions, as theologists, lawmen, or teachers. Then, secondly, local, regional, or state authorities of all ranks. And thirdly, friends and relatives, sons and daughters, brothers or sisters, fathers and mothers. All this means a change in perspective, because applying these criteria to an already very large amount of letters does not only lead to further multiplication of the evidence, but what is more important is that there will be a shift of attention towards a much broader range of topics and questions. Scholars who have studied collections of letters by physicians up to now have done so only on the basis of printed collections. But these differ considerably from much of the manuscript material, in that they cover almost exclusively the epistolary output of a restrained number of famous persons and of those belonging to their circles of colleagues and friends. If we restricted our attention to these, we would run the risk of perpetuating what history of medicine has for some time now been accused of, and not completely without reason, namely to write a history of heroes and discoveries. Our objective instead is to make visible the whole cosmos of the early modern physicians, that is, to add to the history of their science the history of their profession in a wider sense. This includes their social and private situation regarding, for example, salaries, applications, working contracts, compulsory services such as in times of epidemics or under constraint by foreign military. It includes parallel employment, such as physician and schoolteacher, or physician and apothecary, or physician and supervisor of princely architectural projects, or indeed as personal physician and political informer to a ruler. In addition, it includes topics as private libraries or letter collections, or the exchange of manuscript casebooks between practitioners, or poetry of occasion for childbirth, wedding and funeral, or again, looking for a wife to marry, or for a teacher for their sons. Moreover, academic physicians were part of an elite, not so much perhaps in terms of salary, but rather of getting involved. It's remarkable how many of them took deep interest in the big issues of the century, as are the Reformation and the confessionalization of the German states and the conflicts that followed from it. In short, I think that with the database we offer, it should be possible to gain deeper and also different kind of insight than before into the history of a socially and professionally important group of people whose contribution to urban and regional as well as court history of the Holy Roman Empire should be rated as highly as the contribution to the development of medical science. Let's therefore have a short glimpse first at the database so that you may see what kind of research will be possible. First, some words about our summaries. We're not going to produce critical editions, evidently, nor transcripts, but it remains our goal to summarize a considerable and, as we hope, representative part of the whole. As we're dealing with letters that range from a few lines to 10 or more pages, it is obvious that our summaries will also vary in length. There are quite a lot of letters covering 10, 20 or more different topics as well, so summaries may amount to 2 or more pages too. Nevertheless, almost a fifth of the 26,000 letters mentioned now has its summary. Surely you will want to know about the criteria for judging a letter worthy of these extended procedures. In a way, every decision in this field is more or less arbitrary, but on the whole we try to keep up a sane balance between letters in Latin and letters in German, or Italian, or Greek, or French, between scientific controversies and private or public affairs, between prominent and obscure protagonists, between letters from Copenhagen or Montpellier, or from Leiden and Königsberg. Sometimes whole series may be well worth it, like the correspondence of the Nuremberg physician Michael Besler, which provides an unusual overview over his entire academic career, beginning with the students' complaints and financial shortcomings reported to his father when he was sent to university at the age of 15, and ending decades later with the exchange of scientific news with Italian colleagues he had come to know during his peregrinatio academica. And here's one of his father's letters, actually, and this would be how it looks in the database. Sorry, can't read the summary now, but this is more or less like it. Another topic of interest may be the local medical organization of towns or counties, small ones as well as big ones. Augsburg, for example, the rich merchant city of the Fugger family, has had the extraordinary fortune to have all acts of the local Collegium Medicum preserved. That's 4 large archive boxes, which alone have contributed about 1,000 letters to the project. Now, it's fairly obvious that with these numbers, neither editing nor even resuming them all will be possible. Instead, we're aiming at giving a maximum of information possible on all letters we have seen ourselves, and not taking over only from lists or catalogues, which we also do. This is provided by indexing them through keywords, by identification of persons mentioned in the text, and of contemporary works debated. And for this we use two interfaces, one to the GND, the German normative database of persons, and the other to the Bavarian Union Catalogue of Libraries. In order not to leave the user with only the keywords, but without a context, these letters will also receive a minimum of summary, about 1 or 2 lines. And at the moment, there's only 1/3 of all letters that has not received either summary or keywords. So 70% have. And here's one of the records. This comes from Wrocław or Breslau, and you can see there's only a very short summary, but there are some keywords too. Now, to give an example of what kind of results may come out of a query based on one of our keywords. In the Holy Roman Empire and in some neighboring regions, such as Switzerland, there is an institution unknown or at least uncommon to other European countries, the so-called town physician, Stadtphysicus or Stadtarzt. This is an official function held by an academically trained practitioner with a number of duties towards the public. As there were hundreds of cities, this office would be the career objective for many young men leaving a medical faculty. In consequence, the files of town archives in Germany dealing with medical matters are full of letters of application for such posts. So if we enter the search term Stadtarzt, at present some 700 letters from dozens of archives will emerge, regarding about 50 different towns from the Alps to the Baltic. On this basis, it has for the first time been possible to analyze the arguments brought forth by the supplicants, taking into account a broad interregional and diachronical record. The result is that practical skills and experience in the job were clearly regarded by the authorities as the decisive argument in favor of a candidate, and that the supplicants were well aware of this. This in turn meant that the academically trained had to set aside their own traditional image of theoretical superiority in order to adapt themselves to practical needs. This fact would never alight in the scientific letters some of these men would also give to print, imitating their colleagues at university, but it was part of their real life as documented by the local archives. Now, as we are including a great number of letter writers that were not part of an inner circle of famous persons, there's also a lot of additional prosopographical information to be stored. And I'm now coming to what Miranda called the data collection area. There are now almost 5,000 biographical entries for physicians who only in part have been identified as letter writers up to now, but might turn out to be letter writers later. This is kind of information that does not well fit into a field structure like our database has, but has to be kept up to date as well, which is why we have assembled it in an additional semantic wiki structure. Here's one of the biographies, just to give an example. And you can see the linked words, which are not only linked, but also tagged, as it is a semantic wiki structure. This enables us to rearrange contents under various aspects, such as lists of students of a university, for example, going from Königsberg to the list of Königsberg students, or lists of personal physicians at a specific court, or of town physicians in any place from Aachen to Zurich. This procedure is also in accordance with the policy of the Union of German Academies, who have been urging projects to give full public access to this secondary material too, at least after conclusion of the projects. But it's not only in the wiki that we assemble information in new ways. In fact, there's a considerable percentage of letters set to print that also survives in original manuscript form. We are bringing together these different lines of transmission for the first time in most cases. This does not only help to recalculate the total number of letters, which nevertheless we estimate to be well beyond 50,000 in the end, but it has led to another important insight, In fact, the printed texts of the letters are quite often far from what they were in the original. And I shall just give an example from the beginnings of the 16th century. Joachim Camerarius, close friend of Melanchthon's and one of the leading philologists of his time, undertook an edition of letters which was to document the flourishing of humanism at Erfurt before and during the Reformation of the 1520s, where he himself attended university. It is not, therefore, a critical edition of sources, but a biased collection. Now, in this volume, there are a number of Latin letters from the famous physician and Erfurt professor of medicine, Georg Sturz. Fortunately, these letters still are preserved also in manuscript in the impressive Camerarius Legacy, which is kept in more than 70 manuscript volumes by the Bayerische Staatsbibliothek in Munich. But, as you can see or not see here, the manuscript reveals that Camerarius himself altered the text considerably, without giving any notice of this procedure in the edition. As a humanist and teacher of ancient languages, he might be suspect of mainly changing stylistic details. But this is not the whole truth. In fact, Camerarius added whole paragraphs to the original text, dealing also with theological themes. And as the letters in question date from the crucial year of 1521, he is highly suspect of having sought to influence the historiography of the Reformation by this. Of course, we cannot do special inquiries of this kind ourselves on all the letters. Normally, we are just putting together the information for readers, and as in the case just mentioned, where edition and manuscript transmission are both indicated in the database entry, like here. Yeah, I've got the manuscript signature at the beginning and then the hints to the editions. We would thus like to encourage every reader to consider the complete record, not only the manuscript, and to compare the printed text to the handwritten original before drawing any conclusion. The outcome may be, for example, that the famous controversy between William Harvey and Caspar Hofmann about the significance of blood circulation should be reconsidered once again. Or that the famous author of the most famous author, of medical letters of the age, Johannes Crato, did almost never produce concise scientific essays in epistolary form, as it would seem from the edition, but that his 16th century editors suppressed all the abundant passages on private and political questions. To conclude, let me briefly mention some technical problems, or rather challenges, we've been facing during the first years and which may seem similar to things you've experienced. First, with our project, main problem is the question of images. I didn't yet mention that for almost all printed letters, we are able to offer direct hyperlinks to the early modern editions, digitized in large numbers, mainly by the Bayerische Staatsbibliothek. For example, we can offer a link to this Camerarius letter edition here, and then link it to the scanned book. For the pieces extant only in modern editions, and thus underlying restrictions of copyright, we still have to redirect users to the printed version, which at the moment to me seems unproblematic. But what for the manuscript originals from these many archives and libraries? It's here that we are facing serious difficulties, because we don't only have hundreds of different rights owners, but also do we have large part of the photographs taken ourselves with permission by the archives, but without permission to publish them. And normally in a quality you can't publish, that's DPI. So we can read them, but can't publish them. For these reasons, we cannot now offer any pictures, with the exception of those collections like the Swiss E-Manuscripta or Uppsala University Library, for example, that have decided to grant free access to everybody. And the second and last point regards the exchange of data, obviously, between various projects, such as we've now heard about EMLO. There is now, for example, a cooperation with Basel University Library, which will enable us to import data for several thousand physicians' letters, probably also with digital pictures in the near future. But then again, this is a library catalog and not a research project. And a slightly different situation, of course, arises from the various parallel ongoing projects of letter databases, which focus on one author or topic, and which may cover letters that are also relevant to us. This includes, for example, the correspondences of the Swiss reformers, or the very good Johannes Dantiscus database from Poland, or also parts of the material covered by EMLO. Now, it may seem unreasonable to handle things twice or even more often in different databases, and this is something where we have to find a solution, but up to the present, I think it has been tolerable. After all, each project team has different approaches to their letters, and if two or even more sets of data for one letter will stand alongside for a time, each will be different and adding to the others. But on the other hand, of course, a solution on a larger scale has to be sought, and I would be glad to hear some suggestions from you in this respect. And I think I will end with this. Thank you.